The morning began as the first rays of sunlight filtered through the tree canopy. The air was fresh and cool, and glistening dewdrops still clung to the blades of grass. HGG woke up, readied a small knife, and stepped out into the garden behind her house. Before her lay carpets of lush green grass stretching out in the early morning sun. HGG bent down and used her knife to cut the tender, fresh blades. With quick, clean strokes, she gathered handfuls of grass into a large bundle. Once she had cut enough grass, HGG carried it all to the buffalo shed. Upon seeing the feed, the buffalo quickly approached. HGG set the grass down and used her knife to chop it into manageable lengths. This made it easier for the buffalo to eat and ensured nothing went to waste. Though simple, this task was a familiar part of a farmer's daily life. Having finished her morning chore, HGG picked up her basket and set off across the verdant tea hills. A winding path between the rows of tea plants led her to a household in the village. Upon arrival, HGG cheerfully greeted the residents. Together, they walked out to the garden. Today, they were harvesting tender pumpkin shoots. Lush green pumpkin vines sprawled across the ground, bearing soft, young shoots that were thriving. HGG carefully selected shoots at the perfect stage of tenderness. She used her knife with precision so as not to damage the plant. The harvested shoots were gathered and tied into neat bundles. Once the work was done, HGG paid the garden owner. She carefully arranged the bundles in her basket. But the harvest was not yet over. HGG carried her basket to another garden. There, she met a villager and exchanged cheerful greetings. Then they began picking water spinach together. Rows of tender green water spinach stretched out before her. Each bunch of greens was carefully hand-picked and tied into uniform bundles. Once the desired quantity was gathered, HGG packed the water spinach into clean sacks. She secured the sacks tightly. After paying the garden owner, HGG brought the entire harvest out to the roadside. She neatly arranged the bundles of tender pumpkin shoots and sacks of fresh green water spinach in baskets. Finally, HGG transported the produce to the market. A busy morning had passed, resulting in fresh, high-quality crops harvested straight from the garden and ready for consumers. Amidst the peaceful countryside setting, this simple labor not only provided an income, it also embodied the diligence, skill, and deep affection the farmer held for the land and the harvest. On her way to the market, HGG encountered a few locals heading to work or preparing family meals. Spotting the fresh, vibrant bundles of greens, some passers-by stopped to inquire. HGG cheerfully set her basket down by the roadside and took out the bundles one by one to show them. The first customer selected a few bunches of water spinach, carefully inspecting each stem before agreeing to buy. Another person was drawn to the tender pumpkin shoots, picking out bundles with the fresh green hue and soft stems that looked as though they had just been harvested. After the customers paid, HGG quickly tidied up the remaining produce and continued on her way. She managed to sell a portion of her vegetables before even reaching the market. Upon her arrival, the scene shifted completely. The air was filled with the sounds of buying and selling. Calls between people, the noise of vehicles, the rustle of bags being set down, and the chatter of bargaining blended together to create the distinctive atmosphere of a rural morning market. HGG found a suitable spot and set down her basket, arranging the vegetables neatly in front of her. She grouped the pumpkin shoots separately, while the water spinach was bundled in rows for easy selection. Soon, shoppers began to notice HG's small stall. A woman approached and bent down to examine the pumpkin shoots, checking the tenderness and quality of the tips before asking the price. HGG answered cheerfully and handed the customer a few bundles that met her approval. After a moment of consideration, the woman bought several bunches and paid. Nearby, another customer was selecting water spinach, using their hands to check the freshness of each bunch and picking out those with straight, green, and crisp stems. HGG busily handed vegetables to customers, collected payments, and rearranged the remaining stock. As the morning progressed, the market grew increasingly crowded, with a steady stream of shoppers passing by. Some shoppers stopped by just to buy a few bunches of greens for a family meal, while others bought more to stock up for the day. Trading was lively in other parts of the market, too. Fishmongers busily prepared orders for customers, and meat stalls bustled with buyers. Further away, other vegetable stalls displayed a colorful array of fresh produce. The sounds of the market shifted constantly, voices calling out, laughter and chatter, the back and forth of bargaining, and the rumble of carts passing by. Amidst this lively scene, HG's stock of vegetables gradually dwindled. Customers selected bunches of pumpkin greens, and the water spinach was snapped up one by one. The basket, brimming just that morning, now held only a few remaining bunches. HGG waited patiently for more customers. She gently adjusted each bunch, brushed away stray leaves clinging to the stems, and arranged them neatly. Finally, the last of the vegetables found buyers. HGG accepted the payment, thanked the customers cheerfully, and glanced at her nearly empty basket. After a busy morning, she had sold everything she brought. She gathered her remaining items, checked her earnings, and stood up. Slinging the basket onto her back, HGG walked out of the market feeling happy and relieved. Behind her, the market remained loud and bustling. Shoppers continued searching for fresh ingredients for their families, while vendors stayed hard at work. After leaving the market, HGG gently carried her basket and walked along the familiar street toward home. Afternoon was settling in. The sunlight was no longer harsh as it had been in the morning. Instead, it had softened, filtering through the rows of trees and casting a pale golden glow over the road. The streets were quieter now, with only the sound of HG's footsteps mingling with the familiar rhythms of daily life. A short distance along, HGG spotted a hardware store by the roadside. A wide array of work tools was displayed out front. She paused, thought for a moment, and then stepped inside. After looking around, HGG began searching for a high-quality knife. The shelves held a variety of knives in different sizes and styles. She carefully picked up and examined each one, checking the blade and handle before finally selecting a sturdy knife that fit comfortably in her hand and was well suited for the task at hand. Next, HGG turned her attention to finding a hoe. After some consideration, she chose a sturdy, durable model with an iron handle ideal for fieldwork. She brought her selected items to the counter. After paying, she carefully placed the knife and hoe into her basket, arranging them neatly so as not to disturb the items she had purchased earlier. Everything was sorted. HGG picked up her basket, stepped out of the shop, and continued her walk home through the peaceful afternoon. On her way home, Wang suddenly spotted a chicken feed shop by the roadside. Looking at the neatly arranged bags of feed, she remembered that she had run out of chicken feed at home. Huang immediately went into the shop and asked to buy some cornmeal. The seller quickly weighed out the correct amount and gave it to her. Huang checked the bag of flour, then paid. She carefully placed the bag of cornmeal into her basket, neatly arranging it with the other items she had bought earlier. Everything was ready. Huang picked up her basket and continued on her way home in the peaceful afternoon. Along the familiar road, Huang slowly made her way home in the peaceful afternoon. After a long day, everything around her seemed to become slower and quieter. When she arrived home, Huang opened the door, set down her basket, and carefully put each item she had bought in its proper place. Then she took the newly purchased feed outside and gave it to the grown chickens in the yard. As soon as they saw the feed, the chickens quickly gathered around and leisurely pecked at each grain. Huang sat nearby, quietly watching them enjoy their meal. The peaceful moment made her feel relieved after a long day of work. A little later, Huang stood up and walked to the garden, where the buffalo was tied. She gently untied the rope and led the buffalo back to the shed. As the afternoon light faded, everything around the house became calm and peaceful. After a day of work, Huang returned to the simple routines she knew so well. The quiet afternoon slowly came to an end in the peaceful surroundings of her home and garden. Day 2 began with a peaceful and cool morning. The air was fresh and gentle, while tiny drops of dew still rested on the leaves, sparkling softly in the early sunlight. Huang woke up as usual, quietly prepared for the day, and went into the kitchen to get food for the chickens. She carried the feed to the back of the house and scattered it for the flock. Watching the chickens grow bigger and healthier every day filled Huang's heart with happiness. She sat for a while, quietly watching them eat and enjoying the calmness of the morning. Soon, Huang stood up, picked up her basket and the farming tools she needed, and quickly left the house. She crossed the familiar village roads and headed toward a garden belonging to one of the villagers. From a distance, she could already hear people calling to one another and laughing together. Today, everyone was working together to harvest sweet potatoes. Although the work was busy, the morning air remained fresh and full of life. Huang quickly joined the others. First, she used the buffalo to pull a plow through the soil, turning over the earth and exposing the rows of sweet potatoes underneath. Once the soil had been loosened, Huang took a three-pronged rake and carefully worked along each row, bringing the sweet potatoes up from the ground. The freshly dug potatoes were picked up, brushed clean, and arranged into neat piles. The sweet potatoes looked firm, clean, and delicious. Huang chose one, gently brushed away the remaining soil, and tasted it right there in the field. Its natural sweetness made her smile with delight. After all the sweet potatoes had been dug up, everyone began the next step, cleaning them. Huang carefully wiped each potato, removed any remaining soil, and placed them neatly into her basket. Before long, the basket was filled with plump sweet potatoes. Huang then gathered a few more and put them into a sack to take home. After making her payment, Huang carried the basket of sweet potatoes on her back and held the sack in her hand. Before leaving, she turned around to say goodbye and thank everyone. Then she continued along the familiar roads toward the market. The morning remained gentle and peaceful, with her footsteps blending into the sounds of the countryside, as another day began with a simple sense of peace and vitality. When Huang arrived at the market, a lively and energetic scene appeared before her. The morning market was already crowded with people coming and going. The voices of sellers calling out their goods, the footsteps of shoppers, and the sounds of bicycles and carts blended together into the familiar rhythm of a countryside market. Huang calmly looked for a suitable place to sit, somewhere she could easily see people passing by. She placed her basket to one side, prepared her sack of sweet potatoes, and carefully poured the potatoes out to display them for sale. The firm, clean sweet potatoes quickly caught the attention of shoppers. Before long, several customers stopped in front of Huang. They bent down to look at the potatoes, chose the ones they liked, and asked about the price. Huang smiled, answered their questions, weighed the potatoes, and carefully placed them into bags. Her first sale was completed quickly, and she felt happy to see her hard work bringing results. After that, more and more customers came by. Some chose large potatoes to take home for their families, while others preferred smaller ones for a simple meal. Huang patiently selected the potatoes according to each customer's request, weighed the right amount, and handed them over. The sack that had been full at the beginning slowly became lighter. The area around Huang became increasingly busy. At the nearby stalls, sellers enthusiastically introduced their products, while shoppers moved from one place to another. Conversations and laughter filled the market. Some people carried large baskets, while others slowly walked from stall to stall, searching for what they needed. The colors, sounds, and movement all came together to create a lively picture of a traditional village market. Huang remained seated, selling her potatoes while quietly observing the people around her. From time to time, she smiled when she saw customers pleased with the potatoes they had chosen. Although the work was busy, it gave her a feeling of happiness and reassurance. After some time, only a small number of potatoes remained. Huang carefully gathered them together and placed them neatly in front of her so customers could easily choose. Finally, the last sweet potatoes were sold. Huang looked at the empty sack and smiled with satisfaction. It had been a busy morning, but it was a rewarding one. She began packing everything away, folding the empty sack neatly, checking her basket, and putting away the belongings she had brought with her. After making sure that nothing had been left behind, Huang stood up, adjusted her belongings, and prepared to go home. She said goodbye to the familiar vendors and walked away from the market. The familiar countryside road stretched out ahead of her. Huang walked at an easy pace, feeling relieved after selling all of her sweet potatoes. The sounds of the market gradually faded behind her, giving way to the peaceful atmosphere of the road home. Another day's work had brought her another simple joy, and Huang continued walking with a smile on her face. After returning home, Huang barely had time to rest. She put down her basket and quickly got to work. Huang took the new knife she had bought and went to the front of the house. She began cutting the thick grass along the roadside, working carefully and steadily. She gathered the freshly cut grass into small, neat piles beside her. After working for quite a while, Huang had cut a large amount of grass. She gathered the small piles together, forming one large pile and tying it securely so it would be easier to carry. Then Huang carried all the cut grass to the back of the house, where the two buffaloes were tied. She sat down and carefully took handfuls of grass, using her new knife to cut them into smaller pieces. This would make it easier for the young buffaloes to eat. When everything was finished, Huang cleaned up her tools and looked back at the work she had done that day. Another busy day finally came to an end in the peaceful surroundings of home. Day 3 begins with a truly peaceful morning. Soft sunlight slips through the trees and covers the garden in a gentle golden glow. Outside, a few chickens wander freely around the yard, pecking at the ground as they look for food. Their occasional calls blend with the soft morning breeze, creating a simple and familiar countryside atmosphere. After getting everything ready, Huang leaves her house carrying her familiar woven basket. She follows a small village path toward the garden of another family in the village. Today, her task is to harvest tomatoes from their net house. From a distance, the garden is already filled with rows of healthy tomato plants. Inside the net house, clusters of tomatoes hang heavily from the vines. Some are fully ripe, bright red, plump, and fresh. Others are still green, creating a colorful scene full of life. Huang puts down her basket, takes a small basket, and begins her work. She carefully looks over each cluster and chooses the tomatoes that are just ripe enough to pick. Gently, she twists each tomato from its stem, making sure not to damage the other fruit on the plant. As the small basket gradually fills, Huang transfers the freshly picked tomatoes into the larger basket. The work may look simple, but it requires patience. Huang slowly moves from one row to another, carefully selecting each tomato. From time to time, she stops to taste a ripe tomato right there in the garden. Its fresh, juicy flavor brings a small smile to her face. Then she continues harvesting, her hands moving quickly but gently. After a while, the large basket is filled with beautiful red tomatoes. Huang checks the rows once more and picks a few more tomatoes, this time placing them into a separate bag to take with her. Looking at the harvest, she seems happy with the beautiful batch she has collected that morning. When the work is finished, all the tomatoes are gathered together and weighed. Huang and the garden owner check the total weight, calculate the price, and settle the payment for the tomatoes she has harvested. After carefully arranging everything, Huang ties the bag securely and gets ready to leave. She carries the tomatoes out of the garden, places them neatly into her basket, and continues toward the market. Along the familiar village road, Huang walks under the gentle morning sunlight. The fresh tomatoes will soon arrive at the market, beginning a new journey from a small garden to the meals of families in the area. Day 3 passes quietly and simply, yet it is filled with the small joys that come from familiar work and everyday life in the countryside.
Không ạ, cà chua là con trồng nhà tưới bạn. Lãnh đạo thường trực tỉnh ủy, hội đồng nhân dân, ủy ban nhân dân tỉnh, lãnh đạo và cán bộ các sở, ban ngành đoàn thể, lực lượng vũ trang của tỉnh, các đồng chí lãnh đạo thành ủy.
Trị giá 120.000 đồng. Bà con sẽ được tặng ngay một phần quà của công ty.
Mẹ ơi, con á. Đây này, cô lấy cái này này á. Đây, với lại có thể gì
với can stick.
Kém là bao nhiêu? Chiên nhặt lẹo rồi. Lẹo rồi. Bao nhiêu tiền một cái này? Người ta lấy nhập rồi còn gì kêu gì nữa.